Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so today we're going to take a closer look at a topic that's really been everywhere in health conversations, semaglutide. But this deep dive, it's not just about a medication. We're looking at a pretty profound shift, actually, in how we understand our bodies, our habits, maybe even ourselves. We want to move beyond the headlines, explore something more nuanced and I think more hopeful. Our main source for this conversation is Dan Hollis. His book, Slim by Science, offers this really unique perspective. And the thing is, Dan doesn't talk like a marketer. Not at all. He sounds more like someone who's really lived in that space, that hallway between biology and identity. So our mission today is to unpack what Dan Hollis is really teaching. It's not just like how to lose weight. It's about how to not waste the window semaglutide opens up for you. And he told me something right at the start that honestly, it really struck me. He said, semaglutide doesn't fix you. It gives you space to fix yourself.
That is such a powerful way to frame it, isn't it? Right away. He talks about it, not like some magic pill, but, well, the way an experienced builder might talk about a really good lumber. It's not the finished house, right? There's not even the foundation. But it's the kind of material that makes building something strong, something lasting, actually possible. But only, and this is key, if you're ready to do the work, it sets the expectation right there.
Yeah.
This is enablement, not just a passive fix.
Right, enablement. So what does that space actually mean for you, the listener? Dan's core idea here, and where we kind of started our chat, is that hunger, well, it isn't always just a physical signal. Often it's a stand-in, like a surrogate for meaning or comfort or maybe just escape.
That's such a critical distinction because
Right.
when a medication like semaglutide dials down that physical signal,
Yeah.
that constant biological noise,
Yeah.
the static just goes away. And what's left behind in that quiet? Well, it could be pretty startling. Dan has this incredibly powerful line, when the cravings stop, the truth begins.
Mm.
And for a lot of people, that's this moment of real clarity, yeah. But
Mm.
sometimes it's also disorienting.
Disorienting, exactly. You'd think maybe life just gets simpler when you're not constantly fighting thoughts about food. And okay, sure, in some ways it does. But Dan specifically warned about this post-craving reality.
Yeah.
The grief even, the disorientation that can pop up.
Yeah.
Because for so many people, food was the plan. It set the rhythm for their day. It was their escape hatch, their default coping strategy. It's almost like losing a companion.
Yeah.
A familiar one, even if it wasn't healthy.
That's right. And that leads straight into what Dan calls emotional hunger. Yeah, often feels like a craving, sounds like one too. But he says it's actually more like a question. It's a deeper need asking to be seen, really. Just think about it. How often do we think we're hungry when we're actually just tired
Yeah.
or lonely or maybe just completely overstimulated? What you're reaching for isn't always food. Sometimes it's connection or comfort or just clarity.
And what I really value in Dan's approach is he doesn't shame this pattern at all. He just names it. He frames emotional hunger not as some kind of weakness, but more like wisdom misdirected. It's a signal from inside you, but it's just, well, aiming at the wrong target.
Exactly. And that's precisely why semaglutide doesn't just solve emotional hunger. It can't. What it does is make the biological noise quiet enough so you can finally hear what's really going on underneath. That's the critical point here. Semaglutide isn't the solution itself for emotional eating. It just provides the quiet space you need to find your own solution.
And here's something I think will really resonate with you listening. The true power of these GLP-1 meds like semaglutide, it isn't just appetite suppression. It's the profound opportunity you get to actually rebuild things. Your identity, your behaviors, your whole emotional awareness, all while those relentless cravings are kind of taking a back seat. It's this unique window for some really deep personal work.
It really is. Dan's guidance is all about helping people separate, true physiological hunger from what he calls signal confusion. He encourages us to see cravings not as enemies we have to fight off, but more like messengers. They're carrying information.
Yeah.
Healing that emotional hunger, well, it takes empathy.
Yeah.
For yourself. It takes
Good luck.
awareness,
Fine.
like really paying attention. And it takes asking the question that's hiding behind the craving. It's about responding with insight, not just impulse.
Okay, so if semaglutide helps quiet the internal noise, what about the external stuff? What does Dan say is like absolutely essential for making real progress? He really focuses hard on the role of support, community. He said something powerful that it really stuck with me. Most people don't fail because the medication doesn't work. They fail because they were alone.
Wow. Yeah, that hits home. Because the challenge isn't just the weight, right? It's this massive identity shift. Your body can literally change faster than your mind. Your sense of self can keep up. You can wake up feeling like you're in a different body, before your internal map is updated.
And that is exactly why Dan brings in this concept he calls scaffolding. It sounds practical, and it is. He's not just talking about like pep talks or general encouragement. No. He means actual neurobiological replacement structures. Things like rituals, a daily rhythm, consistent routines, the stuff that acts like a lattice, basically. It keeps people upright when the internal chemistry wobbles, or just when life happens.
He's super clear on this point. Support isn't some optional extra. It is, in his words, neurobiological scaffolding. It's not just a nice to have. He sees it as fundamental if you want to build something that actually lasts, something resilient.
That's why, digging into Dan's work, I started seeing this wasn't just a weight loss story. Not really. It felt more like a human architecture story. His whole model isn't aiming for quick fixes in 6 weeks. It's aiming to help people rebuild their sense of agency, reframe what gives them meaning, and sort of relearn momentum in their lives. Which brings us to how Dan completely redefines the goal. The win condition, as he puts it. He argues pretty strongly, this journey isn't about eating less, it's about living more. So what does that mean for you listening, beyond just the numbers on a scale?
Well, putting it in that broader context, success, for Dan, it stops being only about the scale number or your clothing size. It becomes about whether you feel alive enough, engaged enough, to stop measuring every single thing by food. It's kind of liberation, really. Getting free from that constant calorie counting and shifting your focus to a fuller, richer life experience.
And maybe the most, sobering line, but also incredibly empowering, was this one. Weight loss is biology. Staying there is narrative. That single sentence, for me at least, it just crystallized why so many people rebound after losing weight.
Yeah. They often do the hard biological work. They lose the weight,
Yeah.
but they never actually rewrite their internal story. They just, as he puts it, they go quiet. And then eventually, often they drift back to the old patterns because that core narrative, it hasn't shifted to match the new reality.
So Dan's work is all about preventing that silence from turning into relapse. It's about actively, consciously filling that space semaglutide gives you. Filling it with structure, yes, but also community, a renewed sense of identity, purpose, and just time. He's definitely not promising perfection. Nobody gets that. He's offering a framework, though, a way to make your next chapter feel genuinely written by you instead of just sort of happening to you.
It does raise that question, though. Why do people go back? And another key insight from Dan here is fascinating. He says people don't relapse into hunger. They relapse into confusion. For him, keeping the weight off isn't just about managing metabolism. It's this really profound process of narrative reassembly. It's like finding your internal compass again after it's been spinning.
Okay, but what happens when things go wrong, when you hit a bump? Because let's be honest, setbacks happen in any big change. And in weight loss especially, people often feel just awful, weak, undisciplined, like they're broken somehow when they stumble. It's a really heavy burden.
It absolutely is. And what's so, I think, refreshing about Dan's view is how he totally reframes that. He says, failure isn't the end. It's a message, a moment of feedback. He even says, and sometimes it's the most honest conversation you'll ever have with yourself. He talks about it like it's just data, something to observe, learn from, and then build on.
So from his perspective then, a relapse isn't like a betrayal of all your progress. It's often just the brain kind of asking for that old familiar rhythm, that deeply grooved pattern. It's not a moral issue.
Exactly. And Dan warns quite pointedly that most people aren't failing semaglutide. They're failing to prepare for what comes after the cravings quiet down. They're unprepared for that new post-craving reality we talked about. And the internal landscape it suddenly reveals.
Which means that when things break down, when progress stalls, it's often just a signal, a sign that the support system needs shoring up, maybe, or that the strategies need tweaking. It's not necessarily that the person themselves is weak. That's a huge shift, isn't it? Moving from blaming yourself internally to looking at the external system around you and adjusting that.
Yeah. Dan really teaches that setbacks are almost sacred if you're willing to look at them with curiosity instead of just judgment. That's where the really deep learning happens. That's where sustainable change actually takes root.
And just to hammer home this really liberating idea about failure, he says this: the shame isn't in failing. The shame is in pretending you were supposed to be perfect.
And he argues that grace, real self-compassion, it's built in those moments. When you stumble, and instead of reaching for blame, you reach for a better tool or a different strategy, or maybe just ask for help. It's about constructive problem solving, not self-punishment.
So as you're reflecting on your own journey, maybe whatever change you're navigating, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this slip-up, this failure? And maybe more importantly, Is that story actually helping me become the person I want to be?
That's a really powerful question to sit with. This whole deep dive into Dan Hollis's wisdom, it really shows he's not about quick fixes, not at all. Instead, he offers this really thoughtful pathway to deep, lasting change. And he does it by encouraging us to slow down, listen more carefully to ourselves, and just ask better questions. It feels genuinely transformative.
Absolutely. Dan Hollis comes across as the kind of guide who, he doesn't walk way out ahead of you shouting advice back. He's the one walking right beside you, or maybe holding up a mirror sometimes, and just gently asking those better questions, the ones that lead you to your own insights. And frankly, in a world that's often just full of hype and quick hacks, that kind of subtle, patient guidance, that might just be the most radical and the most effective approach there is. So as you think about everything we've discussed today, maybe hold on to Dan's most potent insight for making change last. Weight loss is biology. Staying there is narrative. What story are you writing for your own journey? And how can you make sure it's a story that truly supports you and empowers you for the long haul? Something to think about.